Good morning, brothers and sisters in the Dharma.
Good morning.
Very happy to be back at Mudita Buddhist Society. So the sharing this morning is on the KARANIYAMETTA Sutta. This is the Buddha's discourse on loving kindness. So it is about how we can practice loving kindness. But it is not just as simple as just practicing. There are some conditions we have to prepare ourselves before we actually are able to properly and fully practice loving kindness. Now, if we were to summarize the Buddha's teaching in a nutshell, then this verse from the Dhammapada 183 would be very suitable to summarize the Buddha's teaching in a nutshell. Basically, it says, abandon all evil ways, enter the good life, and purify one's mind. The three main things, right? And this is the teaching of all the Buddhas. You notice the word Buddha there is in plural. What this really means is that when the Buddha remembered his past lives and remembered all the Buddhas that he has met in the past lives, he has remembered that basically all the Buddhas are teaching exactly the same thing. So these three main parts, abandon all evil ways, enter the good life, and purify one's mind, represents a summary of what all of us should try to do with our life before we even can reach a state where we are able to attain Nibbana. So this is really about mundane practice. This particular Dhammapada verse has a different translation which most of you are aware of. Abandon all evil ways and enter the good life are the translations of my teacher, Venerable Dr. Punaji. But the normal, common or popular translation is avoid evil, do good, and purify one's mind. So those are the common translations. But my teacher pointed out that it is not just about avoiding evil, and it is not just about doing good. Because over many lifetimes we have accumulated defilements, and we have also inherited our past life karma. So, and in the process of our upbringing, we have also programmed or conditioned our mind with various kinds of defilements, lust, greed, hatred, and delusions. And these things arise from time to time until we are fully purified, until our mind is fully purified. All these defilements will arise from time to time. So if we were to say avoid evil, we can't avoid it because when it arises, it is arising from within us. It is not something we can avoid, so to speak. But my teacher pointed out the proper thing to do is to abandon it. When it arises and it makes us have ill will, it makes us have greed and lust, then we must learn to let it go, abandon. Don't react to it, let it go. That's the meaning, abandon all evil ways. So it's really abandon all evil ways will help us so that we do not do harm upon ourselves, and we also do not do harm upon other people. So not harming ourselves and not harming others. This is because we are able to abandon these evil ways that arise from within us, our defilements disturbing our mind, and then we learn to let it go instead of reacting to it. Somebody makes us angry and we experience ill will, we just let it go. We see something so pleasurable, we want to have more of it, and we realize that overindulgence in anything is not good for us. When we feel excited, we want to indulge, we learn to let it go. So it's abandoning. Right? Then the next one, and do good. Now the word do good is the normal popular translation. Do good suggest that you just do good from time to time. And my teacher pointed out, it's not about doing good from time to time. It's about living a life of goodness. So it is enter the good life is a more accurate translation of that. To enter the good life. And that is to live a life of purity. To live a life of goodness. Doing good. And this is where metta comes in. Doing good both means we ourselves have to practice morality and righteous, virtuous morality, but it also means that we also have to help other people. So when we say enter the good life, living a life of goodness, what does it mean? It means we are cultivating wellness. That means good health, comfort and peace. Right? So wellness, peace and harmony, happiness with all beings. So it's about cultivating this, not only for ourselves, but also for the beings around us, helping other beings to attain this wellness, peace, harmony, and happiness. So this is entering the good life. And then comes the last part, purify our mind. And this is where we are able to practice meditation to help purify the mind and cleanse our mind of the defilements. It's only by cleansing our mind of defilements through the process of practicing meditation that we are able to reach a state where our mind becomes pure. And when our mind has become perfectly purified, then we would be attaining Nibbana. Because when the mind has become perfectly purified, then it is actually free from craving, tanha. Free from craving, and when it's free from craving, then we are able to free ourselves from suffering. So that is what can help us. And when we are able to do that, what does it do for us? It helps us to awaken from the dream of existence and discover our boundless potentials within, because every one of us has the potential to become a Buddha. So this is awakening of the human's boundless potentials to become the Buddha. So this is really the three things that can very simply summarize what the Buddha is trying to teach us to do. The more complete teaching, of course, what we should do and how we should practice comes in the form of the Sublime Eightfold Way. So it is the Eightfold Way that can help us practice completely and in a more perfected manner if we're able to practice each of these eightfold steps. Right? The first two deals with a level of wisdom to help us understand what are the evil ways. Because if you don't understand what are evil ways, what is unwholesome, what can hurt or harm you, hurt or harm others, then you cannot really abandon the evil ways. You cannot avoid evil. So this first part, Samadhi, helps us to understand unwholesome versus wholesome. Whatever can hurt us versus whatever can help us. What is good, what is evil. So we're able to understand that through right view. And with that, we then want to practice the wanting, the desire, the wishing, the aspiration that is in the second noble truth. And that is Sama Sankappa. They call it right intentions. My teacher called it harmonious orientation. That means you reorientate your life, redirect everything you do in your life to practice goodness. So this is really entering the good life. This is what it is. So the first two of the Eightfold Path sets us on the right way to first be able to abandon evil ways, because we now understand what are the evil ways from right view. And then from our intention, we want to practice it, and that helps us practice to enter the good life. Without this intention, we can never do anything wholesome, because if we don't have the intention, then we are not being mindful. When we are not being mindful, we will continuously practice or do things which are unwholesome. It's only through mindfulness to be aware what is right from wrong, what is good from bad, what is wholesome from unwholesome, that we're able to abandon the evil ways and able to follow the good things. Having attained these first two of the Eightfold Way, we are now going to put it into action. And the first thing we have to do would be right speech, harmonious speech. That is to be able to exercise those four important right speech. Number one, to always speak the truth and not to be speaking untruth. Right? Number two, to avoid saying things that can cause trouble to other people. Divisive speech. That means speech that divides people, speech that causes people to fight amongst themselves. And the third right speech would be to avoid harmful speech, malicious speech, speech that hurt or harm other people, injure other people. And finally, the fourth one is to avoid useless speech or gossips or partake in rumors. So those are the four right speech. And then we have right action. That everything we do, we have to be mindful that our action will lead to our karma. And we are the owners of our own karma. So we have to practice right action. And to take it even one step further, we then have right livelihood, or my teacher calls harmonious lifestyle. Now the word livelihood sometimes gives a slight misunderstanding. Some people think right livelihood is only about choosing the right occupation. Yeah, choosing the right occupation is part of it, but that's not the only thing. That's why my teacher calls it harmonious lifestyle. And this is where you really enter the good life. Your whole life, everything you do in your life is centered around goodness. It is not about just doing good from time to time. It is about living a life imbued with goodness. That everything we do is centered around goodness. And what is goodness? Basically, it begins with metta. Right? So these three collectively are called sila, and that is the morality or virtuous moral conduct. So that is sila. And this will prepare ourselves to then purify our mind, because if we are not able to reach this point, then we are constantly engaged in things which may be unwholesome. And if we are still engaged in activities that may be unwholesome, it becomes very difficult to try to purify our mind. It's like a glass of water. If that glass of water continue to have contaminants, continue to have dirt in the water, then that glass of water can never be clear and purified easily. But if you're able to avoid putting more dirt into the water, then you're able to purify the water, then the water eventually can become pure. But as long as you continue to introduce dirt into the water, there is no way you can purify the water. Any purification of the water, you then introduce dirt and then it gets dirty again. In the same way, our mind, if we don't practice sila, no amount of purification can purify our mind. We got to restrain ourselves from introducing new defilements. So sila is a very important foundation before we can even purify our mind. And the process of purifying our mind comes in the form of meditation. So preparing ourselves with panya, which is the basic level of wisdom, through the first and the second noble truth. The first and the second of the Eightfold Path. And then living a life of goodness with right speech, right action, and right livelihood. Then we are ready to purify our mind. And that purification comes in the form of the meditation process. And that is in right effort, right mindfulness, and what is called right concentration. Right effort is sama vayama, which is made of four parts. Right Mindfulness is basically about the practice of satipatthana, which is again based on the four foundations of mindfulness. And right concentration samadhi is basically the practice of entering into a state of stillness of mind. And the ultimate process that can help us still the mind is the satabojjhanga. The 7 steps to awakening. And some call this the 7 factors of enlightenment. These are the 7 steps to awakening, satabojjhanga. So this would then help us purify our mind. Right? And this is really what the Buddha is able to put into a package called the Eightfold Way, the Eightfold Path. Because he has realized it, he has accomplished it, he has attained that level, and he did not attain it in just one lifetime. Actually, it's through an accumulation of countless lifetimes in the past that he started practicing purification of his mind, practicing sila, practicing panya, and finally able to attain the highest and most supreme bliss of Nibbana and become the Buddha in the last lifetime when he was born as Prince Siddhartha. So he practiced this throughout many lifetimes. And it is mentioned in the commentaries that throughout these past lifetimes, he has perfected 10 perfections. And these are the 10 perfections that he has ultimately perfected, and that's how he is able to attain the highest bliss of Nibbana. And what are these 10 perfections? Right? They're not necessarily in any order in the sense that, oh, one comes after another. Basically, these are 10. They are 10 foundations. You could say it's 10 things that need to be done. And that is dana, generosity, and giving. Not only giving of money or property, but giving of oneself. So this is offering our own services. That is a form of dana. So it's not just giving money or giving property, but also giving our own time, energy, and effort. That is dana. And then sila, and this is virtuous morality. Right? Virtue, morality, and moral conduct. Then we have to, in order to perfect himself, he finally had to renounce from his princely life. So renunciation is also an important part. It also raises one question. Then people will ask, can lay people ever be enlightened or become an arahant? Actually, it is possible, but harder. Because in our lay life, we are still constantly exposed to all kinds of sensual pleasures. We are constantly exposed to indulgences. And as long as we are still exposed to indulgences, it will be very difficult for us to purify our mind. Like I said, constantly there is still dirt being introduced into the glass of water. No amount of things you can do to that glass of water can purify it if you constantly introduce dirt. And living our lay life, we are constantly faced with pleasures. We are constantly faced with stress and frustration that leads to ill will. So we are constantly exposed to all these defilements. So it's very hard to purify our mind. Although it is possible, but it is very, very difficult. So renunciation is an important part where we give up worldly pleasures and give up worldly indulgences, and then we are on the path of really purifying ourselves. Then the Buddha also attained a level of wisdom. Right? And this wisdom is deep wisdom. Right? So panya. Then putting in the effort, the energy and the diligence to do the right thing, to live a good life, to abandon evil ways, that is virya, the energy and the willpower. And also sometimes when we do things, it may or may not succeed, so we have to have the patience. And even when we try to do our best, there will always be other people who may be unknowingly or unmindfully doing things that disturb whatever we try to do. If we are trying to meditate, there could be some kids playing around, making noise and disturbing our meditation. Or if we are trying to perform good deeds, there are also other people who are maybe getting in the way, right? Interfering. So we got to learn to be patient. And this is about patience, tolerance, and forbearance, the ability to withhold our reaction when we are disturbed, right? And then comes practicing whatever is truthful and honest, right? And having this determination, the perseverance, never give up, the resolution that I will succeed. And it is the Buddha, when he was during the final day, when he started to meditate under the Bodhi tree before he became awakened, he had a resolution: I will not leave until I succeed. Right? So having this resolution. And then it brings us to the last two. Actually, these two are just a summary of 4 parts. It's metta and upekkha. These are actually 2 that are part of the 4 Brahma Vihara: metta, karuna, mudita, and upekkha. That is loving kindness, compassion, altruistic happiness, and stillness of mind, or mental equilibrium, which is often translated as equanimity. So these are the 10 perfections that the Buddha has perfected before he finally reached the last rebirth as Prince Siddhartha. Then he was able to purify himself to the ultimate level and become the Buddha. So this is not, this is not something that we can do within one lifetime, but it also means that we must have the perseverance not to give up, to keep going at it, right? The atitana, the perseverance, the determination to keep at it, never give up. So it all comes together, these 10 perfections. So it will lead us then to the final last 2, which is part of the 4 Brahma Viharas. Chattari Brahma Vihara, the 4 Brahma Viharas, or commonly called the 4 divine dwellings of the Brahmas. And another term for the same is called the 4 immeasurables. What are the 4? Metta, karuna, mudita, upekkha. And if we're able to cultivate these 4 and attain that level, then we would, if we are not completing the attainment of perfection, at least we can be reborn in a higher realm, in the Brahma realm. Right? So basically this is the 4 Brahma Vihara. That if we are able to perfect our practice and attain these 4 states, then we could be reborn in the Brahma realm, even if we do not become enlightened. So in order to understand the 4, we have to first understand the first one. So today's sharing is about the first of the 4 Brahma Vihara, metta. So what is metta? Now, of course, many of us would have practiced some kind of metta at some point in time. And also in the process of meditation, we would also have practiced metta aspirations, where we then begin with, may I be well, comfortable and peaceful, and then spread it to may everyone in this room be well, comfortable and peaceful, and then spread it further and further and further. But here, when I talk about the metta, I'm not really talking about that practice. I'm talking about what did the Buddha specifically say about metta. And that is found in 2 sutras. Both have the same name, Karaniyametta Sutta. One is found in the Sutta Nipata, the other is found in the Kudaka Pata. Okay. So In this sutra, Karaniyametta Sutta, there are 10 verses. And these 10 verses talk about the virtuous qualities as well as the meditative development of metta. Now, after that sutra, I will also highlight to you another sutra called the Metta Minisamsa Sutra, which basically talks about the benefits, and this is found in the Anguttara Nikaya, talking about the 11 benefits that we can attain, 11 benefits we can get from practicing metta, from perfecting the practice of metta. Even if we are not able to perfect the practice of metta, in the process of practicing metta, we would from time to time be able to experience these 11 benefits maybe in small doses. Right? So there are 10 verses in the Karaniyametta Sutta. They are very well organized because they actually have a particular sequence to it. So the first 3 verses talks about the preparation, how one needs to prepare oneself in order to properly practice metta, about virtues and about qualities that we need to cultivate or inculcate within us to properly prepare ourselves so that we are able to practice metta fully. Then the next 2 verses talks about how we can radiate this loving kindness in an unconditional manner. That means we are not saying that it's only to my family. I'm practicing metta only to my family members, or I practice metta only to people I know. But it is unconditional. So these 2 verses talk about the unconditionality of practicing metta properly. And then verse number 6 talks about the aspiration that when we radiate metta to others, we also have an aspiration that other people would do the same likewise. That is extending it beyond, extension. And then number 7 talks about the depth and the intensity of metta. And here the Buddha used the example of a mother and her only child in order to give the example of the depth and the intensity. How would a person be so willing to sacrifice his or her life for another person? And this is most commonly found in the mother and her only child. A mother would do anything for her only child. Most mothers. A mother would do anything for her only child. And the Buddha used that as an example, that metta is like that. We are willing to do anything to help other people. And then verse number 8 talks about the directions where we radiate metta. And finally, the last 2 verses focus on the cultivation of the spiritual growth. So loving kindness is really a spiritual practice. It is not just a mundane practice, but also a spiritual practice. And it can help us cultivate spiritual growth to perfect our practice as good Buddhists. Right? So these are the 10 verses. Let's run through each verse one by one. Verse 1, 2, 3 talks about the preparation. So here I'm using a standard translation from one of the translators. There are many translations. Actually, there are books published where there are 10 different translations, and some of the verses, they are a little different from one translation to another. So it's really not so important as to try to compare all the translations. What is more important is to understand the essence of what each verse is trying to say. So the first one talks about preparation and talks about what kind of people will be ready to practice metta. That it is one who is skilled in doing good and who wishes to attain that state of perfection. Right? And that highest state of perfection is Nibbana. And he should be able, virtuous, perfectly upright, obedient, and gentle and humble. These are the qualities. So I was very fortunate to have studied this sutra with the help of Bhante Pemaratana, right? And when he visited here last year, he was here earlier this year, but during his visit last year, he gave a very detailed discourse and a very detailed explanation of this sutra, and I was very fortunate to have taken notes. So I'm offering to you on the right hand side some of the notes that I've taken. Basically, the first verse talks about a person has to be skillful in knowing and discerning good from evil. Right? That means we are able to discern and say, this is wholesome, this is unwholesome. It's only preparing ourselves in this way that are we able to avoid the evil things and able to do the good things and do the right things. So this is really an important preparation to cultivate the skill of discerning, be able to understand, and be capable and confident of whatever is good and wholesome deeds that we have to practice. We must be able to do it and confident that we can do it. And then there must be 6 qualities we have to imbue. Being able. Able means having the ability, right? We are not bounded, right? We're not in a coma. If you're lying in a hospital bed in a coma, then you are not able. So we have to be able to think clearly, able to do properly, do things properly, able. Virtuous, that means we must also in the process practice virtues, sila. Right? And moral, right? That means our behavior must be moral, morally correct. And discipline, and we must discipline ourselves, train ourselves. And finally, kind and humble, that we must be kind both to ourselves and to the people around us. Because metta is not just talking about practicing it to others, but also to ourselves. Self-compassion, self-metta is also very important. That's why in the meditation states, we sit there and we begin with, may I be well. Because if I am not well, how can I wish and help other people around me to be well? So being self-compassion is also a very important aspect. And then to be humble. Right? And it's only through humility that we are able to go beyond this ego. Otherwise, the ego will stop us. So humility is the opposite of ego. Right? So where do these come from? How can we cultivate this skillful in knowing and discerning good from evil? It is from right view. Right? Go back to very beginning of the Eightfold Path. And how can then we become capable and confident of good and wholesome deeds? That is from right intentions. We have this aspiration, we want to do it, confident that we can do it. So this is the initial level of wisdom that is necessary. And that's why the Eightfold Way is so beautiful. It explains the foundation and the proper method we can go about, right, achieving this. So this is verse number 1, the preparation. And verse number 2 is continuing on the preparation, talking about being contented, being easily looked after. That means we are able to help ourselves. We don't depend on other people. We are not bound on the wheelchair. If you're bound on the wheelchair, it's very hard for you to move around to help other people, because you need people to help you. Right? So here is talking about being able to be easily looked after. That doesn't mean that people bound on wheelchair cannot practice metta. They can also practice, but of course they do have limited capacity in the sense that they're not so mobile, right? And basically, very importantly, not a burden to others, and we have few duties, meaning few distractions, few obligations in life, and simple in livelihood. That means we are leading a simple life, not a complicated life. And then we are able to control our senses so that we don't get distracted by sense pleasures. We don't get distracted by ill will, right? And discreet and impudent. That means to be straightforward, right? And not greedily attached to families. And this is the part where some people may have some misunderstanding. When it says not greedily attached to families, it doesn't mean that you ignore your family. The key word there is greedily. Not greedily attached to family, meaning that we are not doing things only for our family. That's really what it means. Because if we're greedily attached to our family and we have some resources, who would we give it to? We would give it only to our families, right? So here the key word is not about not attached to family, but it is about not greedily attached. Don't overemphasize your own family when you want to practice metta. So the notes I got was that we must be free from desires and easily supported, not a burden. So you must be free from these desires and easily supported and not a burden to other people. That's the key thing, not a burden. You can be old, but as long as you're strong and healthy, that's fine. No obligation, meaning you don't have people you are obligated to. You still have to take care of your elderly at home or whatever. So that's why it's important to have no obligation and simple lifestyle. Because if you are surrounded by all kinds of obligation for your time, your energy, your money, your resources, how can you help other people? You are already having difficulty helping yourself. And not seeking excitement, not seeking things to distract you in your life, and not an annoying personality. No troublesome habits. This is also an important part, which is not a burden. No troublesome habits. Not a noisy person, right? And finally, the last one is non-clinging to family or household life. It doesn't mean to ignore your family. That's not the meaning. There are monks who still take care of their parents in some way, but not so much physically, but still they go back to see their parents, they make sure their parents are fine, and when they realize that their parents are not well, they will get someone else to take them to the doctor and things like that. So, but not clinging, able to do that, right? Non-clinging to family or household life. And non-controlling, and this is also another part about that last verse, non-controlling and dominating over family members, dictating to your children and grandchildren what should you do. That's also part of this clinging, because you are now clinging to your power. You are the father or the grandfather, you have a certain authority, and you're clinging on to that authority also. So this is also part of the preparation. So you see, if you really want to practice metta, you have to realize that you must let go the control as authority, you see. Not to say that you don't guide your children, but do not control them too much, clinging on to the control. And continuing with the preparation, verse number 3, he should not commit any wrongdoing, and this is where the moral conduct comes in, so that wise people do not find fault in him. So, people will see you as an example. If they think you are a crooked person, if you think you are dishonest, even if you try to do good, honestly try to do good, people still don't believe you, they don't trust you, right? And to be able to wish, if you really want to do good, you must be able to wish that all beings be happy. Not just human beings, all beings. This is very important, because here the Buddha is making clear it's unconditional to beings, not necessarily only human beings, all beings. And you will find later, right? Be safe, may their hearts be wholesome. This is the wish for all beings, and that's what metta is. All beings, not just to human beings, but to animals, street animals, to insects, to birds, to fish, right? So first we must be morally upright, good people, and then we must be free from ill will and virtuous and ethical, right? Not a person who is questionable in character. And most importantly, everything we do, we are doing it in a wholesome, blameless, resourceful, and exemplary manner. Wholesome meaning it's free from ill will, free from lust and greed. Blameless means whatever we do doesn't hurt other people, even though we don't intend to, but sometimes it hurts. And one example of hurting other beings, even if you have good intention. Now, I'm not against it, but I'm pointing out you have to be very mindful how you go about it. And that is taking animal, buying animal from a pet shop or whatever and releasing them. Buying fish and releasing them in the river. Do you know what you might be doing? You could be contaminating the river with a species of fish that is not meant to be there. And that species of fish may cause disruption to that ecological environment. And this is why you have to be very mindful. When you want to partake in animal release, be wise. Don't just buy birds and then release it, right? Because every time you go to a bird shop and buy birds, what are you doing? You're creating demand. So what happens? The bird shop knows this bunch of Buddhists, every year during a certain time of the year, they will come and buy birds. So just before that, he's going to place an order to the bird catcher. Catch more birds this time. You see, are you really releasing birds? Or are you creating a demand so that the bird catcher can now catch more birds and make more money from you? Right? And along the way, you might be harming the birds. If you have to release the bird early next morning, of course the pet shop won't be opening 6 o'clock in the morning for you to come and pick up the birds. You will have to pick it up the night before. Now if you took the birds the night before and took it home, how are you going to keep the birds? And there's some people say 108 birds. 108 birds is a lot of birds. Where are you going to keep the birds? So they put inside boxes. You think the birds is not suffering? What are you doing keeping 108 birds in a box overnight? You are hurting the birds. Are you really helping the birds? You are hurting the birds. And some might even die in the process. And this has happened before. People buy 108 birds. At night, overnight, early next morning, they take it to release, open the box. 3 or 4 inside, dead already. And you are responsible. It's your karma. Even though you didn't want to kill the bird, but you have to realize, by buying the bird and putting it in there, you are practicing lack of wisdom. So if you really want to do this kind of things, do it with wisdom. So birds, in fact, is one of those things you should avoid. Fish is another one you have to be very careful. It doesn't belong to that river. Releasing it in that river or that pond may cause disruption to the stability that is inside there. You have to realize that some fish will feed on tadpoles and eggs of other fish. Now if you release that fish in that pond, then the other fish cannot survive. Every time they lay eggs, this fish will eat it all up. Every time the frog lays eggs, and by the time they hatch and become tadpoles, this fish will eat them all up. So you're actually destroying the environment. So do be very careful. Now, then people will ask, what is a good animal release? Now, I've been thinking about this because I was caught many years ago, and I realized the mistake. Then since then, I've been thinking, what is a good animal release? And I realized, go to the market, without telling them your intention, buy live chickens. Take the live chicken, go to the forest and let them go. You are really saving the chicken from being slaughtered. And chickens are very tough animals. You'll be surprised how tough a chicken is. And the chicken will not starve. You know, what does a chicken do all day long? Tok, 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 tok. What's he doing? He's looking for food all day long. Now, if he were to be in the jungle, plenty of food, seeds, leaves, and plants, and fruits. The chicken has plenty of food to eat. And the chicken can fly up when a dog comes and pounds on him, the chicken flies up and avoid the dog. So the chicken can survive. I've been thinking about this. Buying chicken from the market, live chicken, taking it to the jungle and releasing it, that is one way. And the chicken is not a predator. Right? He's predator to worms, but he cannot eat up all the worms in the forest. You don't worry about that. So releasing live chicken in the forest is perhaps the most meaningful way to do it. Fish is not fish. You have to be careful. You're contaminating the environment, right? So this is example of blameless, resourceful, exemplary. That everything you do, people look up to you as an example of kind person, right? Exemplary. And this is the precondition for wishing others to be well. So in order to practice this, where does this come from? How can you be morally upright, virtuous, free from ill will, right? And be wholesome, blameless? It comes from the practice of right speech, right action, and right livelihood. So you see, the Eightfold Path is beautiful because it is all interconnected. So this is really about practicing Sila in the Eightfold Path. Then comes number 4, the unconditionality of practicing metta. So you must radiate metta to help beings, whether living beings they are, whether they are weak or strong, whether they are long, fat or medium, whether they are short, small or large. So basically this is talking about the scope to who you should practice metta. Right? You aspire loving kindness, to who you should spread loving kindness. And basically it's talking about whether beings are moving and non-moving, immobile beings. And this set me thinking. Although when I asked a few monks, they never really answered, but some gave me the suggestion. Think about beings, animals. What animal is immobile? Or rather, what living thing is immobile, does not move? See, all animals move. So what do you think Buddha is suggesting here? That we plants. This doesn't mean you cannot pluck plants. It simply means we have to be kind to plants. When we walk the forest, we have to be mindful. You're walking the forest path, and right in the middle of the forest path is a little plant with a flower. Walk around the flower, don't step on the flower. You know, that is an example, being kind to even plants, right? And if you walk whatever, if you see that if you step on it and destroy that plant, then don't step on it, walk around it. That's what it is. And all sizes and all shapes, right? This is without saying that all sizes, all shapes, meaning whether it's big or small or whatever. Unconditionality. Right? Then another unconditionality is whether the beings are seen or unseen, and near or far, and those who are born and those are to be born. To be born. What is to be born? Right? Think about that. Then you must really aspire to help these beings, to practice the loving kindness upon them. That no exception, all beings, no exception, to be happy-minded. So, seen and unseen, or seen or unseen, there are 4 ways of interpreting it. First, it is somebody you know, as well as the people you don't know. So because the people you know, you've seen them. The people you don't know, you may see them, but you don't notice them. So that is the meaning of seen or unseen. People you don't notice. You don't know and you don't notice. So that also we have to radiate metta. The second one is people who are close to you and people who are far away. That means your friends and whoever you know that happen to live near you, and those who have migrated to other countries as well. They may be far away, but it doesn't matter. It could also be strangers in other countries, like earthquake in Nepal, flooding in Sri Lanka. We don't know them, but we have to practice metta towards them. And recently there was this, 2 months ago, there was this fundraising for the flooding in Sri Lanka. Last year there was fundraising for earthquake in Nepal. Right? The third one, noticeable and not noticeable. That means any being around you, when you walk the path, you might be stepping on them. You could be stepping on worms when you walk into your garden. So you have to be mindful. Not to say that every step, before you take the step, you watch, got worms, it's not like that, but at least be mindful. You see a snail, walk around the snail, don't step on it, or don't go near it, or don't destroy their own habitat, right? So noticeable or not noticeable. And finally, it's about beings in our realm and beings in higher realm that we can't see, or the lower realm that we can't see, the Peta realm, right? Hungry ghost and hell realm. So it's basically to beings of all realms. So these are the four important interpretations of seen or unseen. Born and in the process of being born, and that is fetus and fertilized eggs. Right? So this is really being in the process of being born. So this is really the unconditionality of radiating metta. Then the extension, we want to extend it beyond. So when we radiate metta, we practice metta to others, we wish that the other people will also do likewise. So let not one deceive another, nor despise any. So that means the people we radiate metta to, they may be our enemies, but we wish that they themselves do not hate other people as well, right? And persons in any place, and they should not have anger or ill will towards other people, and that they should not wish harm to other people. So the people who receive our metta should in a similar manner do not wish harm to others and wish others well as well. So this is extending metta beyond the immediate people that you are offering metta to, right? Radiating metta to. It is the breadth of reach, the wideness of coverage, right? The wideness, the breadth of reach. Inspires others to practice loving kindness as well. And this extension of aspiration, that it extends further, extends beyond. Number 7 deals with intensity, the depth of metta. And here the Buddha uses the example of a mother and her only child. The closest bond between two persons is always the mother and her child. And if a mother has 10 children, she might not be too close to everyone, but if she has only one, you can be sure that that relationship is super close. So here the Buddha used that example, that just as a mother would protect her only child at the risk of her own life, she's willing to even sacrifice herself to protect her child, even so let him cultivate a boundless heart. That means we should also try to do the same. As though a mother is protecting her only child, when we want to protect someone from harm, we should do it in a similar manner. Of course, it cannot be always comparable, but we do our best in this way. So that means we don't discriminate. So boundless heart towards all beings. So this is talking about the depth or the intensity of loving kindness. How strong do you really want to practice loving kindness to somebody who needs your help? Right? And therefore the mother and her only child is used as the example, and the mother and her only child, she's always practicing unconditional love to her only child. And non-discriminating, that's the important part, non-discriminating. Then number 8 talks about the direction to which we radiate metta. Right? Let thoughts of boundless love pervade the whole world, no exception, right? Above, below, in all the 6 directions, right? In front, behind, left, right, above and below. And without any obstruction, right? And without any hatred, without any enmity. That means even if it is somebody who doesn't like us, we still do it. No enmity. We are not angry with someone. We are not treating them as enemies. What does it suggest? And I was asked this question: should we radiate metta to members of ISIS? You think about it. What do you think Buddha is trying to tell us? It really doesn't matter what he does, what he believes in. Every person who needs help deserves our help. And if we were to think that by radiating metta we can help that person radiate metta further, Don't you think that's even a better reason to radiate metta to members of ISIS? Right? So basically, it's all directions throughout and across the world boundlessly. No discrimination, no exception, and it has to flow freely, no obstruction, and incorporating those who hate us and those who despise us. See? Even those who want to do us harm. We're not saying that we want them to go ahead and do us harm. No. What we're saying that we must feel metta towards them. We must free ourselves from ill will and anger towards other people. Because you cannot coexist. You cannot practice metta while at the same time getting angry about him just because he practices something you don't agree with. See? So therefore the two cannot coexist. So therefore it means we have to free ourselves from the ill will. Even knowing that person hates us, knowing that person wants to kill us, that person wants to do things to harm our environment, still we must radiate metta towards that person when the situation or the time calls for it. Then finally, number 9 and 10 talks about our spiritual growth, and also how we can benefit from this in terms of our spirituality, in terms of our spiritual growth. Whether he stands, walks, and lies down, that means in all directions, all postures, whatever the posture is, as long as he's awake. This is important. As long as he's awake means, I'll mention that later on. He should develop this mindfulness. So here it's really about mindfulness in every posture, whatever we are doing. In other words, metta is not only reserved for certain conditions, right? Certain time of day, certain situation, then we radiate metta. No. Whatever we're doing, we are constantly imbuing ourselves with this essence of metta. We want to practice metta to anybody, everybody, wherever, whenever, in whatever posture we're in. We want to practice this, right? And this is the highest conduct. So it's all postures and all activities mindfully. Here mindfulness practice comes in. Mindfully recalling at every moment without exception. So every time we engage in any activity, we must constantly remind ourselves, I must be kind. Kindness is the key. And except in deep sleep, that's why it says as long as he's awake, meaning when we are in deep sleep, in a way the mind is unconscious, the mind is non-thinking anymore, so therefore you are not aware of whatever is going on, therefore you are excused from practicing metta at that point. Alright? So if a person is awake and thinks that he is not ready to practice metta, then he is really being mindless. His mind is not working, basically. Right? His mind is as good as being in deep sleep. And as though living in the Brahma world, here and now. That means, in the Brahma world, they are living in the 4 Brahma Vihara constantly. Metta, Karuna, Mudita, Upekkha. So they are constantly, the mind is constantly, engaging in these 4 states. So he's saying that as though we are in the Brahma world, that our mind is constantly engaged in these 4 states. And where do we get this from? This comes from the final part of the Eightfold Path, the meditation part. The right effort, the right mindfulness, and the right concentration. So it's very important, in order to ultimately perfect the practice of metta, we must be able to also practice it during the course of meditation. Right? So you can see how beautiful the Eightfold Path itself is. It's basically the full methodology to bring about the deepest practice of the Buddha's teachings. And the last verse, number 10, right? Not falling into error, virtuous and endowed with insight. So now you're talking about insight, and this can only come from your meditative practice, the insight, vipassana. Right? And he discards attachment to sensuous desires. Therefore, that means you're able to abandon the 5 hindrances. That's what it is. This is really not only talking about sensual pleasures, but your emotional reaction, and that is the 5 hindrances. So abandoning the 5 hindrances, discard attachment to sensual desires. Truly, he does not come again, which means you will not be reborn as a human being anymore, because it says to be conceived in a womb. That means you will not be reborn in the womb as a human being. Now there's a bit of interpretation there. I'll come to that in a moment. But there are 4 keywords I want to point out. The first one, not falling into error. This is the keyword ditthi, right? Ditthi means to be able to have the right view. So this, you have already reached a stage where now we are manifesting this right view, ditthi. And dasana is insight. Right? When you have right view, you don't make mistakes. You don't easily make mistakes. You may do something unknowingly, but if you have right view, you will not knowingly make any mistake, falling into error. Right? You will not fall into error. And when you have right view, you will have clear vision. And then in meditation, with the practice of vipassana, you will be able to see more clearly the realities of life, the 3 marks of existence: anicca, dukkha, anatta. So this is really having this insight, right? So the ditthi means without clinging to views, beliefs, and free from dogmas. Right? That means you don't have any blind faith about things. You really can understand truly the realities of life and have right view. This is very important, right? And not only that, you're able to have this insight. Look at experience. Insight is not looking at existence. Insight is looking at experience. And therefore, it's looking at experience, how things arise. Anicca, dukkha, anatta. How things come to be. They arise and they fade away. Arise and fade away. Everything is happening like that. Every thought we have arise and fade away. Arise and fade away. Every action we do arises and ends. Right? So this is to be aware, it is constantly happening. So this is looking at things from an experiential point of view, right? Instead of looking at it from an existential point of view. And this way of seeing things is vipassana, coming from the word vi. Vi means very distinct, very clear. Pasana is seeing. Seeing is not only with the eyes. Here, seeing is with the mind. You're able to see things very clearly, distinctly. No mistakes at all. No wrong view whatsoever. That means you have reached a state where your view has been perfected. And this can only come from purifying your mind. Right? So that is through the practice of meditation. And finally, to have vision and aspiration, because this insight gives you vision. You can then have clear vision, and now you have the right intention, and finally capable of breaking away from desires and existences. And when you're able to do that, what happens? You will not be reborn as a human being. You can be reborn in a higher realm, or you may attain the highest bliss of Nibbana. Right? Will not return to existence. You will not come back as a human being. So there's two interpretation of this. He does not come again to be conceived in a womb, meaning you will not be reborn in a human being. You can be reborn in a higher realm. Right? In the Brahma realm specifically, if you practice metta truly and perfectly, you can be reborn to a higher realm before you are ready to attain Nibbana. But when you are ready, you will be reborn back as a human and then to reach that Nibbana state. And that's what happened to the Buddha. He was living in the higher realms for some lives before he came down to be reborn as Prince Siddhartha and became the Buddha. So these are the 10 verses that teach us what really is metta and how to practice it. It is not just so simple as to sit there, may I be well, may all beings be well. It's not that kind of thing. It is really something you have to live in your life. That means it's not talking about doing good. It's talking about living a good life, entering the good life, not just doing good, right? Big difference. So how can we benefit from practicing metta? And the Buddha spoke of 11 benefits. And he told people that if you pursue, develop, and cultivate, and then made a vehicle and basis. Now, look at each of these words very importantly. Pursue. When you pursue, what is happening? You have a goal. You have an objective. So in other words, you must be very clear in your mind that practicing metta is what you're going to do. You want to do this. You pursue it. So in other words, you now start with an objective. Without the objective, then you're not going anywhere. If you don't know where you want to end up, then you have no idea where you're heading. That means if you drive your car onto the highway and you're not thinking where you want to end up, you don't know which road you're going to take. But if you know you want to go to Penang, so what do? You take the northbound highway. Then you reach Penang. Because if you take the southbound highway, you can't reach Penang. Unless you want to reach Singapore and take a boat to Penang, that's different. So that is important, right? Having this objective. Pursue. Develop. Develop means we begin the practice. Knowing what to do and doing what we know. That is the practice. So here develop is, you develop something. How do you develop something? By gradually building it up. So the same way you develop yourself as a practitioner of metta, you know what to do and do what you know. That's it. Then cultivate it. And finally, cultivated means you have now attained the fruition. You have now able to do it. You're no longer just trying, you're actually doing it. Cultivated. You have cultivated it, right? That means it's like planting a seed. Now the seed has finally become a plant and it's flowering. That's what it is. So you are now able to do it properly. Not just still trying, but actually doing. And when you have reached that, and then what you practice is made vehicle and basis. So when it is made a vehicle, it becomes the carrier, right, of your life. Your whole life is centered around doing this, right? And the basis, that is the basis of your living. And that is the purpose of life. Here, talking about basis, it becomes your purpose of life. And then it is carried out, consolidated, and properly undertaken. Then these 11 benefits can be realized. And what are the 11? Right? And this is very interesting. As I flash each one, you think about it yourself. How does it apply to you? And this is found in Anguttara Nikaya, the book of 11, Sutra number 15. There are 11 benefits to be realized. These are fruits, 11 fruits from the practice of metta. One, sleeps well. So ask yourself, do I normally sleep well? If you don't normally sleep well, practice more metta. Right? You got your answer. Why can't I sleep? Practice more metta, then you can sleep well. One, awakens happily. If every morning you wake up feeling stressed and angry, what do? Practice metta. Then you will awaken happily. One does not have bad dreams. Right? If you have wild dreams, nightmares, right? In the middle of the night, terrible things happen in your dream. What should you do? Practice metta. Simple as that. And one is pleasing to human beings, to people around you. Human beings, because we interact with human beings. That's why here it says pleasing to human beings. Now if you are not a nice person, people don't consider you as a nice person. This fellow is a nasty fellow. So what should you do? Practice metta. Then you're a nice person. Simple as that. Now comes the more interesting one. Is pleasing to the spirits, to the devas and the brahmas. Right? Very important. Right? We don't have to pray to them and wish things from them. That is blind faith. That is superstition. That is myth. But if we practice metta, then they will notice us. See, you don't have to do something to attract their attention. But if you practice metta, the spirits will notice you. They will say, there's a good person. Because they live in that realm because they have already attained a certain level of purity in their previous lives. That's why they are reborn in those higher realms. Not to say they are perfect, but they have at least attained a certain level of purity in their life so that they are reborn at the higher realm. Then they will notice you, because they will notice like-minded, right? Birds of a feather flock together. So if they have pure mind, when they notice someone has pure mind, they will notice. Now comes even more interesting. Devas protect you. Simple as that. You don't have to wish for it. You don't have to pray for it. It is not the amount of incense you light, the amount of candles you light, the number of prayers you chant that's going to attract the devas to help you. No. If you are a good person and you do good, they will come and help you one way or another. Now at this point, then the question is, how do they help you? They are not going to make, first, they're not going to make you strike lottery, that's for sure. Secondly, they're not going to make you get your promotion, get your salary increase. No. How can they influence us? They cannot change things physically for us because they are not in the physical realm. They can't affect physically, but they are energy. So what can they do? So what happens when you feel energy? Thoughts arise. So that is how they can influence you. Influence you to have good thoughts. Influence you to have wise thoughts. And this was said, I heard it actually several times from the late chief, Kesari Dhammananda. He said when he started teaching Dharma in Malaysia when he was a young monk, right? One time he was waiting for, after finishing giving Dharma talk, he went outside, waited for someone to come and pick him up. While standing under the tree, he had a thought. Move away from that spot. That thought keeps arising. So he did. He decided, okay, follow his instincts. He moved a few steps away. Soon after that, a coconut fell right on the spot where he was standing. This is an example, right? So devas can help you in that way, influence you. I can also share a personal example, but I am not attributing it necessarily to be to the devas, but I can share my own example, which I guess has something to do with it. When I started giving Dharma talks some years ago, 6 or 7 years ago, when I first started giving Dharma talks, the first or second talk that I was giving, I was using not an Apple, that's why I changed. It was a Windows PC, a laptop. I prepared my PowerPoint. Those days I spent a lot of time. Nowadays very fast. I can do a PowerPoint, 2-hour PowerPoint within a matter of 15-30 minutes. But those days, you know, to do a 2-hour talk, I spent 8 hours. So I spent a lot of time preparing the PowerPoint and finishing the PowerPoint on my laptop. I thought, okay, I go and give the Dharma talk. End of the month only, I back up on my external hard disk. I do that once a month. But somehow there was a thought in my mind. Back up now, back up now. Then I said, never mind, I don't know, back up, come back first. Back up now, back up now. Okay lah. So I took my external hard disk, plug it in, saved my PowerPoint. All the PowerPoints I've had, fortunately, not everything, I did have some files I didn't quite save, but I saved the most critical one, especially that particular PowerPoint that I was just about to go and give a talk in Brickfield. It was about 6 o'clock, the talk was 8 o'clock. So I had 2 hours left, that's it. As soon as I finished backing up, I said, okay, I have done the backup, I disconnected, I normally reboot just to make sure everything is fine. So I rebooted my PC and then it won't reboot. The PC actually already had a virus. It was caught with a virus. It could not reboot, and I realized it was a virus because I'm a little bit PC savvy myself, so I can notice these are symptoms of a virus. Then I know, oh, my PC now, my laptop has a virus. Fortunately, I had a very old laptop that I never use anymore, but was still working. I quickly took that one out, plugged in my external disk and copied the PowerPoint file, and it worked. So I took that old junk all the way to Brickfields and did my Dharma talk. So that is an example. Why did I keep thinking back up now, which is something I don't normally do? See, when your mind tells you to do something not unwholesome, something okay, that means not harming or whatever, and the mind keeps reminding you to do something which is not unwholesome, watch your mind, be aware. Maybe something up there is trying to tell you something. Yeah. So that is just an example. Next one, you will not die in very terrible circumstances. You will not die in a fire. You will not be hurt in a terrible way. You might die of illness. That is partly, not entirely, but could be partly your own fault, not taking care of your health. Right? So you might end up with a stroke because you ate too much fatty food. Every week go and eat bak kut teh. Sure, you're going to get stroke one day. Now I only eat bak kut teh 4 or 5 times a year. Usually whenever I come here. So I'm going to eat bak kut teh later after this. So you may die from those things where you have something to do with it, but you will not die in such circumstances. Terrible circumstances. You will not be hurt by these things. Right? And your mind becomes clear, tranquil. Right? So that means you're able to think clearly. You're not getting confused all the time. This is important. You're a clear-minded person. You are not a person who is constantly kalam kabok. You are a clear-minded person, and your mind can be at peace. That means you don't end up being depression. So if you are getting depressive moods, occasionally you feel depressed, what should you do? Do more metta. Simple as that. That's one way. Because when you focus on helping people, there are some incredible things happening inside your brain. I'm going to show you later on. Scientists have proven that. And once facial complexion is serene and composed, you look like a nice person. You don't look like a terrible looking person. You don't have this terrible face, this animal face. You look peaceful and composed, and in fact you might even have smooth skin. So these are examples. And finally, at the time when your body finally ends, then you will not be confused. You will die peacefully. You will die unconfused. Your mind will be clear in your last moment. You might even know when your last moment is coming. And if you know when that's wonderful. If you know when your last moment is coming, that's wonderful. What should you do in your last moment? Meditate. Bring your mind to a state of stillness. If you know in your last moment, let's say you're struck with a terminal illness, and then you know that the doctor can no longer help you, and then suddenly you realize this is it. What should you do? When the moment you realize this is it, meditate. And if you die meditating, you will be reborn in the higher realms already. Definitely. Right? So this is important. So you will die unconfused, and finally, this is also important, and this supports the thing about being reborn in the Brahma realm. It says, if one does not penetrate further to attain Nibbana, that means if you do not reach that final state where you are now, at the time of your death, you are already an Arahant. If you haven't reached that, doesn't matter. You could be reborn, could be, not necessarily always, but could be reborn in the Brahma realm if you have practiced this. So this is really what metta can do for you. Especially people who can't sleep, people who wake up feeling stressed, people who have wild dreams, people who become very depressed from time to time, right? And people who end up with all kinds of terrible things happening to them all the time. Do more metta. Doing metta, the other thing we must be aware, whatever merits, this could be the result of meritorious deeds. Whatever merits you can accumulate, you will only accumulate those merits if your intention was pure. That means do metta not because you want to sleep well. Do metta because you want to help other people, knowing that helping other people will lead you to sleep well. Good, do more metta. because you want to help other people. Then you don't go around giving charity. I give you so much. Okay, tonight can sleep better. Give you so much. Okay, next week also can sleep better. You know, oh, next month also can sleep better. You know, not like that, you know. Realize that you want to do something, do it from the purity of your heart. And then you will reap the benefits. Now I'm going to show you the science behind, you know, what happens when you do metta. What happens to your brain? Now, very important, your brain, there are two parts of your brain. One part is responsible for your suffering, and another part is responsible for your happiness. So, our brain, now it is not 100% correlated, but basically there is an emotional brain in the limbic system, and there is a thinking brain on the outer side. Inside your emotional brain, there is a part of the brain called the amygdala, a structure called amygdala. And the amygdala is reacting to everything you see, hear, smell, taste, and touch. So amygdala is responsible for your suffering. Because all this reaction, I'll just run through very quickly, all this reaction is making you emotional, disturbing you, making you stress, ill will, anger, hatred, lust, greed, they all come from this. Anxiety, they all come from this. So basically the amygdala is responsible for bringing your mind to a state of discomfort, lack of peace. So that amygdala is disturbing you. But the other part of the brain that is helping you is your thinking brain, cerebral cortex, the outer thinking brain. And your thinking brain has two hemispheres, right? And this thinking brain has 4 lobes. Over the top is the parietal lobe, at the back is the occipital lobe, on the side are the temporal lobe, but most importantly in the front is the frontal lobe. In the frontal lobe, these are the functions. And you're able to remember things and pay attention, able to do logic, calculation and so on, and imagine good thoughts, whatever. But it is these last 2 functions, most importantly, that is responsible for your happiness. To be able to make good decisions, set the right goals, plan your actions, have the judgment of knowing what is right from wrong, reasoning what are cause and effect. If you do this, that will happen. If you do that, the other thing will happen. And rationalizing is balancing your resources, being able to use your resources wisely. If you think about it, these are all the functions that are mentioned inside the sutra. That you are able to have the aspiration, the goal, having the goal, pursuing the goal, knowing what to do, doing what you know. All this is planning, goal setting. And judging, be able to discern what is right from wrong, wholesome from unwholesome. Reasoning, to be able to understand cause and effect. Rationalizing, be able to balance your resources so you can allocate your time and energy in the right way. You see, all these will be responsible for your happiness. And that is found in that little part of the brain behind your eyebrow called the prefrontal cortex. So these are the 2 parts of the brain. The amygdala, responsible for your suffering, and the prefrontal cortex, responsible for your happiness. If the amygdala is aroused, simply put, you are suffering. If your prefrontal cortex is very active, and if you are using your mind in the right way, you will be happy. Simple as that. When you practice meditation, what do? The first benefit in meditation is to put the amygdala to sleep. When you are able to abandon the 5 hindrances, your amygdala is sleeping. So the amygdala is not disturbing you anymore, not bringing you suffering anymore. And then on top of that, when you meditate, you're sharpening your prefrontal cortex. That thinking part of the brain responsible for your happiness becomes very bright. And that is what the Buddha called the luminous mind, the bright mind. Right? And when you have a bright mind, you are able to see clearly. Everything brightens up. The nimitta is there. It brightens up. Nimitta doesn't mean you see the light in your head. No. If you see the light in your head, you're hallucinating. You're not really seeing. It is really a bright mind. Not talking about that light in your head, you know, but a bright mind able to see clearly. Right? That is sharpening your prefrontal cortex. So here the scientist is explaining to Dalai Lama what happens when someone has the aspiration of wanting to help other people, aspiration of selflessness.
If we show people this picture and we ask people to have the aspiration that this baby will be healed and will be free from suffering, what does that do to the brain to have that kind of aspiration? And it turns out when people adopt that kind of attitude, it changes their brain. And so there's a part of the brain called the amygdala, and that's shown in blue. And that part of the brain is modulated when people wish this baby to be free from suffering, transform the emotion to make it more positive and express compassion. And so there's now good evidence to suggest that the brain changes in response to this kind of training. People differ in how skilled they are at voluntarily regulating their emotions. And when people are better able to regulate their negative emotions, they show less activation in this part of the brain, the amygdala, and it's also associated with more activation in a part of the brain in the prefrontal cortex.
Okay, that's a lot of words, so I'm going to explain to you. So what did he say? He says, the aspiration to relieve suffering in others reduces the activation of the amygdala. So what that simply means is that when you have an aspiration of wanting to help people, from the purity of your heart, wanting to help people, your amygdala will not be so activated, not so active. Therefore, you will not be experiencing much suffering in that whole process. So that means when you have an aspiration to help people, your amygdala will be rested. So it won't be excited, it won't be aroused. You are not experiencing any kind of real sufferings like ill will, anger, hatred, greed, delusion, anxiety. You won't be experiencing that because all these experiences come when your amygdala is aroused. Right? That's the first thing. So this simply means you become less easily aroused by emotional excitement. Right? Then the next part, we'll take it slowly. People differ in their skill level at voluntarily down-regulating negative affect. Negative affect is negative emotions. The word affect means emotions. Negative emotions as reflected in decreased activation of the amygdala, which is accompanied by an increased activation of the prefrontal cortex. So basically he says each different person has a different skill level at managing their own emotions. Some of us are able to manage our emotions better, some are not. So this is differing skill level at down regulating, that means playing down your emotional excitement. You won't get so different people have different way of handling their own emotions. But whatever it is, when we are able to handle our emotion, it simply means our amygdala become less aroused and our thinking brain, prefrontal cortex, become more activated. And therefore, we become less emotional. So people who practice metta, what can happen to them is they become less emotional. The more you practice metta, the less an emotional person you are. That's what it really is saying. And then at the same time, you become more rational and clear-minded. You're able to see with right view. So that's very important, clear-minded. So this is what the scientists have discovered. In brains of people who have aspiration of wanting to help other people, because the way they measure this is very simple. They ask the person to put their head through the scanner. That means they go into the MRI to scan their brain, or they wear these things that can scan, that can detect activity in the brain. And then they will show them pictures of various different things. First, neutral pictures, just flowers, plants, trees, normal people doing normal things, and then suddenly they show someone suffering. Then they ask you, what do you think about this person? And if the person who sees this suffering person starts to feel, I want to help him, I want to do something, then that aspiration will show up in the brain scan. So that's really what the scientists have discovered. So this is really scientific proof that when you practice metta, first, you're less emotional. Secondly, your thinking mind becomes clearer. So this is proof. Now, the word metta, very fortunately, there are wonderful English words to use metta as an acronym. And M stands for magnanimous. Magnanimous is a very powerful way of describing generosity. Magnanimous is even more powerful than generous. Generosity, more generous than generosity. Yeah. Magnanimous means you actually are not only generous, you have a big heart. You really want to embrace everything and offer as much as you can. That is magnanimous. Boundless generosity. E, empathetic. You know what empathy is? To understand how people feel, so you can feel for them. You understand how other people are feeling, and that's what metta is. T, you're thoughtful. You're thinking of other people. You're not just thinking of yourself. You're not selfish. The opposite of selfishness is thoughtfulness. You're thinking of other people. And tender, gentle, humble. You're not rough. You're not arrogant. Not aggressive. Right? So you're tender. And finally, most importantly, altruistic. Altruistic means selflessness. The practice of selflessness is the practice of altruism. That's all it is. So metta is magnanimous, empathetic, thoughtful, tender, and altruistic. Right? Wonderful words to describe metta. So if we're able to do something to help people, we go out of our way to do it. But sometimes we're too far away. We're sitting here and we know that something has happened in Sri Lanka. Big floods 2 months ago, major floods, a lot of people died. Many of us have donated some money there. But apart from donating money and sending whatever good stuff you can send to help people, you also must feel something for them, empathetic, thoughtfulness. So metta is also about radiating that sense, that feeling. And you see many things happening around the world, including what I mentioned earlier, ISIS. The ISIS people, they want to hurt other people around them. So when you see hatred, send love. Right? Radiate the love and say, may they experience love. When a hateful person starts to experience love, his hate will subside. He will be able to overcome his hate even without realizing it. So you send love. Express that this is what I wish to radiate. Send forgiveness when you see resentment, strength when you see weakness, tranquility when you see chaos and confusion, peace when you see hostility, people being hostile, and courage when you see fear, and hope when you see despair, people are giving up, you send them hope. Comfort when you see pain, and kindness when you see cruelty, finally compassion when you see suffering. So this is radiating metta, that you are able to radiate this. May suffering ones be suffering free. The fear-struck, fearless be, so that they are free from their fear. May grieving ones shed all their grief, so they are free from their grief. And may all beings find peace and relief, so that they can be peaceful, comfortable, and happy. So with that, I end my sharing. Thank you very much.